They said love is the most beautiful thing in the world. That when you find the right person, everything will fit as magic. But what if I tell you that this idea is destroying relationships? The truth is hard. Modern love has not died, but it is completely distorted. People don't want to love, they want to be loved. They don't want commitment, they want to validate. They look for connections, but escape the effort they require. And in the end, they end up trapped in a cycle of unloving, jumping from one relationship to another, always feeling that something is missing. If you have already wondered why so many relationships seem superficial and disposable, why love seems increasingly fragile, or why, despite so many options, there never seems to be someone right. So this conversation is for you. The problem is not technology, not the lack of good people in the world. The problem is the way we are seeing love, and, worse, the way we are running away from it. But is there still a way out? Can you escape this pattern and build something true? If you want to understand why modern love is broken and, more importantly, how not to fall into these traps, continue with me. You may not like what you will hear, but one thing is certain: after that, you will never look at relationships the same way. Modern love has not died, but it is injured. Not because of technology or excessive options, but because a lot of people are looking for relationships a kind of emotional healing. The problem? Love is neither therapy nor remedy for loneliness. Instead of a true connection, people want someone who validates them, who fills the emptiness that they even understand themselves. And then, when the other fails this impossible mission, frustration, resentment, and soon after, discard it. After all, love has become a product, and products come with an expiration date. This logic creates a dangerous trap: the search for a partner who solves everything. What happens when this expectation does not materialize? The answer is everywhere: people jumping from one relationship to another, convinced that the next connection will be right. But it is not about finding someone perfect, but of learning to really love. And really loving it requires more than instant passion or a perfect fit of lifestyles. It requires effort, self-knowledge, and the willingness to build a relationship, even when emotions cool. And that's where one of the greatest villains of modern love comes in: the illusion that being single means being incomplete. Many fear loneliness, but few understand that true loneliness is not in the lack of company, but in the inability to connect genuinely. Emotional dependence disguises it on love, and the search for external validation keeps a lot of people trapped in cycles of unloving. But is the problem in the other, or inside us? Many people enter a relationship thinking that they found love, when in fact found a hiding place for their insecurities. The fear of loneliness causes many to accept any form of company, even if it means if you lose in the other. When the relationship becomes the only source of happiness, any sign of distancing is seen as a threat. And so, emotional dependence is born, disguised of unconditional love. But do you love to desperately need the other? The problem is that this dynamic is unsustainable. The person nullifies, does everything to be loved, but never feels enough. The smallest change in partner's attention is seen as rejection, and here comes despair, insecurity, the need for constant validation. Love becomes a game of control and fear, not a true connection. For those who identify with this, the exit is not in the other, but in self-knowledge. Working self-esteem, learning to be well alone, and understanding that love is not possession are the first steps to get out of this cycle. And look how irony: the more someone desperately needs love, the more the relationship and the faster destroys it. The fear of abandonment creates the conditions for abandonment to happen. Whoever enters a relationship hoping that the other heals their pains end up finding even more frustrations. Because love is not an escape, it is an encounter, and it can only be true when two people choose to be together, not when one needs the other to feel whole. But if love has become a currency of exchange, what happens when it is no longer useful? Relationships have become a market of interest. Beauty, status, fun, sex, company, everything became a currency of exchange. If one side feels that it is receiving less than it offers, the bond loses the value. And when something loses value, what is done? Discards. This is how modern love works. People don't look for partners, they are looking for benefits. The commitment, which was previously built with effort, is now seen as a fragile contract, ready to be torn in the first dissatisfaction. The problem with this transactional logic is that it ignores the most important factor of any relationship, the true connection. If a relationship only exists while there are palpable advantages, where is real love? Does that genuine desire to be with someone, even when there is no immediate gains? Many cling to what the other can offer, but not the person itself. And so, the fear of loneliness leads to conformism, and conformism keeps a lot of people in empty relationships, where love has been replaced by convenience. And worse, this mindset creates an illusion of abundance. With so many available people, why content with a relationship that requires effort? Why invest in building a bond if there is always the option to change partner? This thought transforms love into a shelf product. But what happens when the initial euphoria goes by and the relationship fails to bring the expected emotion? Many confuse love with adrenaline. If there are no butterflies in the stomach, constant messages, and that overwhelming passion, they think something is wrong. The problem is that this need for intensity creates a vicious cycle. When the initial euphoria disappears, the relationship seems to lose its shine. And here comes the hurry to look for something new, someone who rekindles her flame. But real love is not a roller coaster of extreme emotions. It requires maturity to deal with calm, not just the frenzy. This explains why so many people jump into relationships, always looking for the next great passion. In the beginning, everything is perfect, the charm, the promises, the illusion of having found the right person. But over time, when the routine appears and the other reveals its imperfections, it beats frustration. Is this really the love I want? And often the answer is to escape. But this constant search for emotion prevents any deep bond from being built. Relationships are not only made of electrifying moments, but also from small daily gestures, conversations without major twists, and a constant presence, even on monotonous days. Anyone who understands this finds that love is not on peaks of emotion, but in the constancy of the true connection. But for many, accepting this means facing an even greater fear, the fear of real love. True love scares. It requires vulnerability, patience, and, especially, courage to open without guarantees. Many say they want a deep relationship, but in practice sabotage any bond that requires real delivery. They create emotional barriers, test the other to the limit, or simply move away when they realize that the relationship can be serious. The fear of love is not the fear of the other, it is the fear of exposing oneself, of being seen without masks, without the control of the narrative. This fear often comes from past experiences. Anyone who has suffered in a relationship learns to associate love for pain, creating an automatic reflection of self-defense. Instead of allowing yourself to live a new beginning, it carries ghosts of the past, hoping that the story will be repeated. And since the brain seeks family standards, many end up choosing partners who confirm these pains, sabotage themselves even before they tried something different. The result? Relationships that never deepen, always interrupted before love has time to grow. But avoiding real love doesn't avoid pain, it only exchanges a pain for another. The emptiness of superficial connections, the frustration of never building something lasting, the feeling that something else is missing, it all weighs. Love is not a game where you win those who protect themselves the most. Anyone who doesn't risk it may even avoid some wounds, but also avoids the chance to live a love that is worth it. But are people still willing to strive for it? Love became synonymous with ease. If it requires effort, patience or concessions, many think it was not supposed to be. This mindset creates an unreal expectation that a relationship should always be light, without conflict and full of perfect moments. But the truth is that loving requires emotional maturity. Love does not only survive compatibility in chemistry, it needs construction, daily commitment, even when the initial charm disappears. The problem is that many have been conditioned to believe that when love is true, everything flows effortlessly. So in the first frustration, they start to question if they are with the right person. But what if the problem is not the partner, but the lack of willingness to deal with the natural difficulties of any relationship? A couple who learn to face crises together builds a stronger bond. Small daily gestures, such as validating the other's feelings, avoiding impulsive reactions and investing in dialogue, make all the difference. Real love is not based on times of intense passion, but on the conscious choice of remaining. Who understands this stops seeking the perfect relationship and begins to value the possible relationship, the one who, despite the challenges, is worth cultivated. But ironically, this incessant search for perfection makes many stay alone, trapped in a cycle where nothing and no one seems enough. Many spend their entire lives waiting for the right person, as if an ideal love were predestined to appear at the perfect time. But this illusion creates a serious problem: eternal dissatisfaction. Each relationship becomes a test, and any failure becomes reason to discard the other. After all, if it were to be, it would be easy, right? Wrong. True love is not a magical encounter, it is a construction. But those who spend too much time waiting for the ideal ends up missing real connection opportunities. This search for the perfect partner often hides a deep fear, the fear of making choices and taking risks. After all, if no one is ever good enough, the person never really has to commit to. And this is how many condemn themselves to loneliness, jumping from relationship to relationship or not even allowing something to start. Effective happiness is not to find someone without defects, but to learn to grow together, face challenges and make the relationship evolve over time. What's worse is that this mindset creates a generation of disposable relationships. People come into a relationship already eyeing the next option, believing they can find something better. But what does it mean better? More fun? More attractive? Easier? In the end, this endless search leads to a cycle of unloving, where no one feels truly satisfied. And so, many people come to the end of their lives without ever having experienced a deep love. The greatest paradox of modern love is that the more people seek to be loved, the more distant they get true love. This is because most do not want to love, they want to be validated. He wants someone who calms his insecurities, who proves his value, who fills his emotional voids. And when the other fails this impossible mission, the relationship loses meaning. So many come in and out of relationships without ever building something solid, always hoping that the next finally solve their internal dilemmas. This cycle of unloving feeds on the refusal to look inside. Instead of reflecting on their own standards and insecurities, people prefer to blame their partner, destination, or even the lack of good options in the market. But the problem is rarely in the other. It is in the belief that love should be easy, in the idea that the ideal partner must meet all expectations. But no one can supply what is missing within us. And as long as this illusion persists, relationships will remain only passing relationships, where real learning never happens. The truth is that most people will never know true love. Not because it does not exist, but because they refuse to face reality. Love requires work, requires maturity, requires effort. But many prefer the illusion of the next great love than the responsibility to make a love work. And while this mindset does not change, emotional emptiness will only increase. But does it still have time to break this cycle? The great truth is that love is not dead, it is only being misunderstood. As long as people continue to seek emotion instead of connection, validation rather than commitment, and perfection rather than construction, relationships will follow fragile, disposable and frustrating. But what about you? Will you remain stuck in this cycle of unloving or choose to see love differently? Maybe it's time to ask yourself, am I waiting for the other to fill a void that is mine? Am I running away from the effort needed to build a real relationship? Because if you keep repeating the same standards, it will end in the same place, and believe me, this place is not where happiness lives. Love requires courage. Requires effort. It requires you to look in the mirror and take responsibility for what you attract and what you build. If this content made sense to you, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and keep learning about relationships, self-knowledge and what really matters in love. Because believe me, when you understand how love really works, it is no longer a problem, and becomes a conscious choice.